The penthouse fell silent, except for the sound of crystal clinking against mahogany. Serenity's hands trembled as she set down the decanter, pretending she hadn't understood the Korean words that had just sliced through her like broken glass. Fat, ugly, unworthy of even being in the same room. She'd heard worse before, spent her whole life hearing worse, but somehow, in this glittering space overlooking Lake Michigan, surrounded by men in $1,000 suits, the cruelty felt sharper. She turned to leave, head high despite the tears burning behind her eyes, when a voice cut through the room like a blade. Deep, commanding, deadly calm. "She's perfect." Serenity froze. The words were in English, deliberate, unmistakable English, and they came from Seung-ho Cha himself, the man whose reputation preceded him like a storm, the man who controlled half of Chicago's underground with nothing more than a look, the man whose dark eyes were now fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. "Perfect curves," he continued, his gaze never leaving her face. "Perfect smile, perfect heart." He turned to his associates, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "Any man who can't see that is blind, and I don't keep blind men in my organization." Serenity Martin had learned early in life that invisibility was a survival skill. At 26, she'd perfected the art of moving through spaces without disturbing the air, of serving without being seen, of existing without taking up too much room. It was a skill born of necessity, honed through years of being told, in ways both subtle and explicit, that her presence was conditional, her worth negotiable, her body something to be commented on by strangers who thought their opinions mattered. The Cha estate in Lincoln Park was the kind of place that made invisibility both easier and harder. Easier because the sprawling mansion with its floor-to-ceiling windows and imported marble seemed designed for a staff that blended into the background. Harder because every surface gleamed with a wealth that made her hyper-aware of her second-hand uniform, her worn shoes, her existence as someone who cleaned up after the kind of people who never had to clean up after themselves. She'd been working there for 6 months, ever since her previous job at a Southside diner had folded, leaving her scrambling to cover rent on her tiny Rogers Park apartment and the mountain of medical bills from her grandmother's final months. The pay at the Cha estate was 3 times what she'd made slinging coffee and eggs, enough to finally start chipping away at the debt that kept her awake at night. She didn't ask questions about where the money came from. In neighborhoods like the ones she'd grown up in, you learned early that some questions were better left unasked. Seung-ho Cha was a ghost in his own house. Serenity had seen him exactly 4 times in 6 months, always at a distance, always surrounded by men in dark suits who moved with the coiled readiness of guard dogs. He was younger than she'd expected for someone with his reputation, maybe in his early 30s, with the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers if those magazines featured men who looked like they could kill you without raising their heart rate. Sharp jawline, black hair styled with casual precision, eyes that seemed to calculate trajectories and consequences in the space of a blink. The staff whispered about him in Korean and broken English. Jopok, they said, Mafia, but a different kind than the Italians who ran the restaurants in Little Italy or the Russians who controlled the ports. The Korean underworld operated differently, quieter, more structured, bound by codes of loyalty and hierarchy that went back centuries. Serenity didn't care about any of that. She cared about her paycheck clearing every 2 weeks. She cared about staying out of the way. Today, staying out of the way meant preparing the main sitting room for what Mrs. Kim, the head housekeeper, had described as a private business meeting. Serenity polished surfaces that were already spotless, arranged bottles of whiskey that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and tried not to think about the fact that she'd skipped lunch again to save money. Her stomach growled, a low, insistent reminder that ramen for dinner 3 nights running wasn't actually a sustainable diet. She pressed a hand against her soft middle, against the curves that her mother had called blessings, and that the world had decided were fair game for commentary. Growing up, she'd been big-boned. In high school, thick. In her 20s, the euphemisms had fallen away, replaced by the kind of casual cruelty that people seemed to think was acceptable because it came wrapped in concern. Have you tried? You'd be so pretty if. Men don't really like. She'd learned to build walls around those words, to let them slide off without penetrating. Most days it worked. Most days she could look in the mirror and see what her grandmother had seen. A beautiful girl with her father's eyes and her mother's smile, with skin the color of September honey and natural hair she was finally learning to love after years of fighting it. Most days. The sound of voices in the hallway snapped her back to attention. Male voices, speaking rapid Korean. She recognized Mrs. Kim's efficient footsteps, the rustle of expensive fabric, the particular quality of silence that meant important people were entering a space. Serenity moved toward the door, aiming for her usual seamless exit, when Mrs. Kim appeared with 4 men behind her. 3 she didn't recognize, tall, well-dressed, with the same coiled alertness she'd noticed in all of Mr. Cha's associates. The 4th was Seung-ho Cha himself. Her breath caught. She'd never been this close to him before, close enough to see the way his charcoal suit fit, like it had been designed specifically for his frame, close enough to notice the subtle tattoo that disappeared beneath his collar, a dragon's tail maybe, or something equally symbolic. Close enough to catch the scent of his cologne, something expensive and understated that made her think of cedar and cold nights. His eyes swept over her, a single assessing glance that lasted maybe 2 seconds, but somehow felt like it catalogued everything about her. Then he looked away, dismissing her as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. The familiar sting of invisibility settled over her shoulders like an old coat. "Serenity Sisai," Mrs. Kim said, using the Korean honorific she'd adopted for all the staff. "Please bring the refreshments and then leave us. No interruptions tonight." "Yes, ma'am." Serenity's voice came out steady, professional. Years of service work had taught her how to keep her face neutral, her tone appropriate, her personhood neatly tucked away where it wouldn't inconvenience anyone. She moved through the next 10 minutes on autopilot. Ice in crystal glasses, whiskey poured to exact measures, small plates of banchan, the Korean side dishes that Mrs. Kim prepared fresh each day, arranged on the low table near the leather sofas. The men settled into their seats, their conversation flowing in Korean as if she wasn't there. She caught maybe every 10th word. Her evening Korean lessons on a free language app were progressing slowly, but the basics were starting to stick. As she turned to leave, she heard one of the men say something that made the others laugh. She didn't catch the full sentence, but she caught enough. "Tung-tung-han, chua-han, fat, ugly." The words in Korean sounded almost pretty, like they could mean something lovely. But Serenity had learned enough to know better. She'd learned enough to recognize the tone, the sneering quality that transcended language. Her hand tightened on the tray she carried. She didn't turn around, didn't react, just kept walking with the same steady grace she'd perfected over years of swallowing things that wanted to come up as shouts or tears. Behind her, the laughter continued. One of the men said something else, "Miwahada," and the others chuckled. She didn't need perfect Korean to know they were talking about her body, about the way her uniform fit over her hips, her thighs, her stomach, about the fact that she existed in a space where men like them had to look at her. The door was 3 feet away, 2 feet, almost there. Enough. The single word in Korean cracked like a whip. Serenity's feet stopped moving of their own accord. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a silence so complete she could hear her own heartbeat. "Junho Min-sik, Tai-kyung." Seung-ho Cha's voice was soft, conversational, and somehow more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. "Did you just insult my employee?" "Youngnim, we were just—" one of them started. "Did you just insult my employee?" Each word dropped like a stone into still water. "We meant no disrespect to you. To me." Something shifted in the air. Serenity still hadn't turned around, but she could feel the change, could sense predator energy filling the room. "You think I care about disrespect to me? I'm asking if you insulted her." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Serenity's hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against the tray, willing herself to disappear, to become truly invisible instead of just pretending. "Turn around," Seung-ho said. For a moment, she thought he was talking to his men. Then she realized he was talking to her. Slowly, mechanically, she turned. 4 pairs of eyes fixed on her, but she could only see one. Dark, intense, fixed on her face with an attention that felt like being touched. "Do you speak Korean?" he asked, switching to English. The question was a trap. She could feel it, but lying seemed worse than the truth. "A little. I'm learning." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or satisfaction. "Then you understood what they said." It wasn't a question. She nodded, her throat too tight for words. He stood. The movement was fluid, controlled, and every man in the room tracked it like prey watching a predator rise. He walked toward her, not quickly but with absolute certainty, until he stood close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "What did they say?" His voice was gentle now, coaxing. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." What did they say? The tears she'd been fighting burned hotter. "They said I was fat, ugly, that I was unpleasant to look at." He nodded slowly as if she'd confirmed something he needed to know. Then he turned back to his associates, who had gone very still in their seats. When he spoke again, it was in English, deliberate, unmistakable English that filled the room like smoke. "She's perfect." Serenity stood frozen in the doorway between the kitchen and the main hall, Mrs. Kim's hand firm on her elbow. The older woman had appeared out of nowhere the moment Seung-ho Cha had dismissed his associates, all three of them leaving with faces pale and tight, bowing repeatedly as they backed toward the door like courtiers retreating from a temperamental king. "You stay," Mrs. Kim had whispered urgently in her accented English. "Mr. Cha wants to speak with you." That had been 5 minutes ago. 5 minutes of standing in the kitchen, while her heart tried to hammer its way out of her chest, while her mind spun through possibilities, ranging from getting fired to something worse. Men like Seung-ho Cha didn't defend random employees without wanting something in return. The math was simple and ugly. She was in debt, vulnerable, and he'd just established that he noticed her, that he'd been watching her. Perfect curves, perfect smile, perfect heart. The words should have felt like a gift. Instead, they felt like the first move in a game where she didn't know the rules. "Serenity, see?" Mrs. Kim's voice pulled her back. "You go now, and—" She paused, her weathered face softening slightly. "No worry. Mr. Cha he is good man. Dangerous man, yes, but good." Serenity wanted to ask how someone could be both dangerous and good, but Mrs. Kim was already steering her toward the sitting room, toward Seung-ho Cha, who stood with his back to the door, looking out at Lake Michigan through windows that turned the night into a canvas of reflected city lights. He'd removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves. The gesture somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less, like he was preparing for something that required freedom of movement. "Mr. Cha?" Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Mrs. Kim said you wanted to see me." He turned. Whatever she'd expected to see in his face, anger, calculation, the predatory assessment she'd learned to recognize in men who thought women like her were easy targets, none of it was there. Instead, he looked tired, and something else, something that might have been regret. "Sit." He gestured to one of the leather sofas. "I should really get back to—" "Sit, please." The please made it a request instead of an order, but they both knew it wasn't really optional. Serenity perched on the edge of the sofa, back straight, hands folded in her lap. Every instinct she'd developed over 26 years of navigating the world as a black woman told her to be careful, to be small, to say the right things, and get out as quickly as possible. Seung-ho sat across from her, forearms resting on his knees, close enough that she could see the details she'd missed earlier. The tattoo that disappeared under his collar was indeed a dragon. She could see the intricate scales on what looked like a claw wrapping around his collarbone. His hands were scarred across the knuckles, the kind of scars that came from impact with solid surfaces, or faces. "I owe you an apology," he said. Of all the things she'd expected, that wasn't one of them. "You— what?" "My associates were guests in my home. They disrespected you under my roof. That makes their behavior my responsibility." His English was perfect, barely accented, with the kind of precise grammar that suggested expensive international schools. "I apologize." Serenity stared at him. "You're apologizing to me." "Yes. You're Seung-ho Cha." The words came out before she could stop them. "You run. Everyone knows what you—" She stopped, realizing she was about to accuse her employer of running a criminal organization to his face. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, brief there and gone like a ghost. "Everyone knows what I do, yes, and yet you work in my house. Interesting. I need the job." The honesty surprised her, but lying seemed pointless. "The pay is good. The work is steady. I don't ask questions." "Smart." He studied her with those dark, calculating eyes. "Tell me something. Why are you learning Korean?" The shift in topic threw her. It seemed useful, since I work here, and I like languages. I took Spanish in high school and French on an app last year, and I like knowing how people communicate, how they think. How long have you been studying?" 4 months, maybe 5. She felt defensive now, exposed. "I'm not very good yet, just basics." "You understood what they said tonight. That's more than basics." He leaned back slightly, that intense focus never wavering. "Most people wouldn't have bothered. They'd have assumed no one here would speak to them anyway. Most people aren't trying to better themselves while cleaning other people's houses," she said, then immediately wanted to take it back. Too honest, too raw. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have— Don't apologize for having pride." His voice was sharp, but not unkind. "You work hard. You're intelligent. You're trying to improve your situation. These are things to be proud of. not apologize for. Serenity didn't know what to do with that, with any of this. Men like Seung-ho Cha didn't notice women like her except to use them or mock them. They certainly didn't apologize to them, didn't call them perfect in front of their associates, didn't ask about their language studies like it mattered. Why did you defend me? The question escaped before she could consider whether it was safe to ask. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its careful control. My mother was a maid, in Seoul when I was young. Before, he stopped, then continued. I remember men talking about her the way my associates talked about you tonight, like she wasn't human, like her body was public property for their commentary, like her existence was an inconvenience they had to endure. His jaw tightened. I was 7 years old and I couldn't do anything about it. I'm not 7 anymore. The words hung in the air between them, a piece of truth that felt too intimate for a conversation between an employer and his maid. Serenity felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the careful walls she'd built. I'm sorry, she said softly, about your mother. She's fine now. Better than fine. A real smile this time, brief but genuine. She lives in a penthouse in Seoul and complains that I don't call her enough, but she remembers, we both remember. Silence settled over them, but it was different now. Less heavy, more human. I should let you go, Seung-ho said finally, standing. It's late. But, Serenity, he waited until she looked at him. What I said tonight, I meant it. Every word. Her throat tightened. You don't even know me. I know enough. He moved toward the window, giving her space, giving her the door. I know you arrive 30 minutes early every day and leave 30 minutes late. I know you hum while you work. Old gospel songs, usually. I know you skip lunch most days and always make sure the kitchen staff eat before you do. I know you say thank you to people even when they can't hear you. I know... He stopped himself. I pay attention, Serenity. More than you realize. The revelation should have been creepy, should have felt like surveillance, like the prelude to something predatory. Instead, it felt like being seen, actually seen, not as a body to comment on or a service to exploit, but as a person whose small kindnesses and quiet strength were worth noticing. I don't understand, she said honestly. Neither do I, he laughed, a short, surprised sound. Neither do I, but... He turned to face her again. I'd like to. Understand, I mean, if you're willing. Every warning bell she'd ever developed was ringing. This man was dangerous. Possibly literally dangerous, definitely dangerous in the way that power was always dangerous when it showed interest in you. She should say no. Should keep her walls up. Keep him at a distance. Keep this exactly what it was supposed to be. A job. I need this job, she said carefully. I can't afford to lose it. You won't, regardless of your answer. He said it like a promise, and something in his tone made her believe him. This conversation never happened if you want it that way. You're a valued employee either way, but if you're asking whether I'm interested in knowing you beyond your work here... He paused. Yes, I am. Serenity stood, her legs less steady than she'd like. I need to think about it. Fair. He moved toward the door, opening it for her, a gesture of courtesy that felt almost absurd in the context. Take all the time you need. And Serenity. She paused in the doorway. Those men won't be returning to this house, ever. What they said tonight was unacceptable. That's not negotiable. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and walked out into the hallway. Mrs. Kim was waiting, her expression carefully neutral, and guided her back to the kitchen without a word. It wasn't until Serenity was on the red line heading north, the city lights blurring past the train windows, that she let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The shock, the confusion, the strange, dangerous flutter of something that felt almost like hope. Perfect curves, perfect smile, perfect heart. She pulled out her phone and opened her Korean learning app, but instead of starting a new lesson, she found herself searching for the phrase she'd heard him say, Hyung-nim. It meant something like respected older brother, a term of deep respect and hierarchy, the kind of term that meant his associates saw him as more than just a boss. They saw him as family, and he'd humiliated them for her. Serenity closed the app and stared at her reflection in the train window. Same face she'd always had. Same curves that had been the subject of commentary and criticism since puberty. Same body that the world had decided was fair game for judgment. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she'd felt something different when someone looked at her. Not judgment, not dismissal, not even the aggressive overcompensation of men who fetishized her curves while simultaneously degrading her for having them. Tonight, Seung-ho Cha had looked at her like she was worth defending, like her dignity was worth protecting. Like she was, in his words, perfect. The question was, what did he want in return? And more dangerously, what did she want? The train carried her north toward her tiny apartment, and Serenity sat with those questions, afraid of the answers, but more afraid of never asking. 3 days passed before Serenity saw Seung-ho again. 3 days of working her regular schedule, arriving early, staying late, maintaining the careful invisibility that had become second nature. But something had shifted. The other staff members watched her differently now, their expressions ranging from curiosity to poorly concealed envy. Mrs. Kim was kind but distant, as if unsure how to navigate whatever new dynamic had emerged. And Serenity couldn't stop thinking about him, about the conversation in the sitting room, about the way he'd looked at her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her like she was worth the attention, about his mother, a maid in Seoul, about the scars on his knuckles and the tiredness in his eyes when he'd said, "I know enough." She was polishing the brass railings on the main staircase when she heard his voice, speaking Korean, relaxed, followed by the rumble of a laugh. The sound made something in her chest tighten. She'd never heard him laugh before, hadn't known he could sound like that. Warm, unguarded, almost young. "Serenity." She turned. He stood at the base of the stairs, phone in hand, wearing dark jeans and a black Henley that made him look less like a crime lord and more like someone who might appear in a cologne commercial. Casual, approachable, still impossibly handsome in a way that made her hyper-aware of her yellowed work shirt and the fact that she'd pulled her hair back in a hasty bun that morning. "Mr. Cha." Her voice was steady, professional. "Is there something you need? I thought we could talk." He pocketed his phone. "If you have time." "I'm working. I'll clear it with Mrs. Kim, please." That word again, the one that transformed orders into requests. Just a few minutes. She followed him to his private office, a room she'd cleaned exactly twice in 6 months, both times under Mrs. Kim's watchful supervision. It was different than the rest of the house, less showpiece, more lived in. Books in Korean and English lined the walls, a desk scattered with papers. Photographs in frames that she'd never been allowed to examine closely. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "Coffee? Tea?" "I'm fine." She sat, back straight, hands folded, armor firmly in place. Seung-ho leaned against his desk instead of sitting behind it, a casual pose that still somehow managed to convey authority. "You've been avoiding me. I've been working. You've been working in rooms I'm not in, taking breaks when you know I'll be home. It's been 3 days since our conversation, and you've managed not to be alone in the same space as me once." He said it without accusation, just stating facts. That takes planning. Serenity felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Maybe I just wanted time to think. Like you said I could. You can have all the time you need, but I don't want you to feel uncomfortable in your workplace. If I've crossed a line." "You haven't." The words came out more firmly than she'd intended. I don't know what you want from me, and I don't understand why you'd want anything at all. Why wouldn't I?" The question was so genuinely confused that it almost made her laugh. "Because I'm the maid. Because you're—" She gestured vaguely at him, at the office, at everything he represented. "You. Because people like you don't notice people like me except to—" She stopped herself. "Except to what?" His voice had gone very quiet. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." He moved closer, not crowding her but reducing the distance between them. "Finish the sentence, Serenity." She took a breath. "Let it out. Except to use us, or mock us, or decide that our bodies are public property for commentary. You said it yourself. You remember men treating your mother that way. Well, I've been on the receiving end of that my entire life. So forgive me if I'm skeptical when someone like you suddenly decides I'm perfect." She made air quotes around the word, hating how bitter she sounded. Seung-ho was silent for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He moved to the chair next to hers instead of staying behind his desk, sitting beside her, not across from her. Equal height, equal ground. "You're right to be skeptical," he said quietly. "You're right to protect yourself. And you're right that I have power here, power that makes anything I say or do potentially coercive, whether I intend it or not." He turned to face her fully. "But I need you to understand something. When I said you're perfect, I wasn't making a move. I wasn't setting up a transaction. I was stating a fact, because those men needed to understand that their behavior was unacceptable, and you needed to hear someone say out loud that their words were lies. Why do you care?" Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm nobody. I clean your house. I don't matter in your world. You matter in mine." The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. "And for what it's worth, you're wrong. You're not nobody. You're a woman who works 3 times as hard as most people I know, who studies Korean on her phone during her commute because she wants to better herself, who makes sure everyone else eats before she does, who hums gospel songs when she thinks no one's listening. Who has the kind of strength that doesn't come from power or money or fear. It comes from choosing to be kind and dignified, even when the world gives you every reason not to be. Tears burned behind her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. You really have been paying attention. I told you I had. He reached up, then stopped, his hand hovering in the space between them. May I? When she nodded, uncertain what she was agreeing to, he gently pushed a loose curl back from her face. His fingers barely brushed her cheek, a whisper of contact that somehow felt louder than words. You're beautiful, Serenity, not despite your curves or in spite of them, just beautiful. The kind that has nothing to do with fashion magazines or societal standards, and everything to do with who you are when you think no one's watching. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her entire body was focused on the ghost of his touch, on the way he was looking at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Do what? Be seen like this, by someone like you. I don't know the rules. There are no rules. He drew his hand back slowly, giving her space even as everything in his expression said he didn't want to. Just honesty, that's all I'm asking for. Honesty about what you want, what you're comfortable with, what makes you feel safe. He paused. And for what it's worth, I don't know how to do this either. I don't do relationships, I don't let people in. My life is complicated and dangerous, and there are very good reasons why I keep my distance from people who aren't part of my world. Then why? Because you make me want to try. The confession came out raw, unpolished. Because for 6 months you've been the best part of my day. Watching you move through this house like you belong here even though you think you don't. Hearing you hum those songs. Seeing you be kind to people who don't even notice. You've become... He stopped, seemed to search for words. Important. You've become important. And I can't unknow that anymore. Serenity's hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against her thighs. This is crazy. You know that, right? This whole thing is crazy. Probably. A smile tugged at his mouth, that same brief ghost of an expression she'd seen before. But I've built my entire life on calculated risks. And you, his eyes locked on hers, you feel like the kind of risk worth taking. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed, then again, and again. The sound was sharp, urgent. His expression shifted immediately, from open to guarded, from the man who'd just confessed to feeling something to the crime lord who controlled half of Chicago's underworld. He stood, checking his phone, and his jaw tightened. I have to go. There's a situation that needs my attention. Of course. Serenity stood too, smoothing her shirt with hands that weren't quite steady. I should get back to work anyway. Serenity. He caught her hand as she moved past him. His grip was firm, but not constraining, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. Think about what I said. Not the compliments. Anyone can give you compliments. Think about whether you want to know me. The real me. Not just the reputation. Because if you do, if you're willing to take that risk... He brought her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a brand. I promise I will never make you regret it. Then he was gone, moving with the kind of fluid purpose that reminded her exactly who and what he was. Serenity stood in his office, her hand still tingling from his touch, her mind spinning. The real him. As if she had any idea who that was. As if the man who'd just kissed her hand was the same man whose associates called him Hyung Nim with fear and respect. As if... Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dinner tonight? If you're free. If you want. No pressure. Sean. She stared at the message. At the name. Sean. Not Mr. Cha. Not Seung-ho. Sean. The American nickname he probably used with friends, with people he trusted. An invitation to step across some invisible line from employee to something else. Something undefined and terrifying, and impossibly tempting. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Every logical bone in her body screamed to say no, to maintain boundaries, to protect herself from whatever this was turning into. But she'd spent her whole life playing it safe, being invisible, taking no risks. And where had that gotten her? Alone, in debt, working herself to exhaustion while the world told her she wasn't enough. Seung-ho Cha had looked at her and seen someone worth defending, worth knowing, worth taking a risk for. Maybe it was time she took one too. She typed a response. What time? The restaurant was tucked into a side street in Chinatown, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing unless you knew it was there. No sign in English, just red lanterns and a door that looked like it led to someone's private residence. Serenity stood on the sidewalk, second-guessing every decision that had led her here, when the door opened and Seung-ho appeared. He'd changed from the casual clothes she'd seen him in earlier. Now he wore dark slacks and a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, the dragon tattoo on his neck, visible above his collar. He looked like sin wrapped in expensive cotton, and Serenity was suddenly hyper-aware of her own outfit, a simple black dress that had seemed appropriate when she'd put it on, but now felt cheap and ill-fitting. "You came." His relief was visible, genuine. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't." Honesty. He'd asked for honesty. "This still feels like a terrible idea." Probably is. He offered his arm, an old-fashioned gesture that should have felt ridiculous, but somehow didn't. "But I promised you good food and better conversation. At least let me deliver on the first before you decide to run." The interior of the restaurant was small, intimate, with perhaps 6 tables total, all empty except for one in the back corner, where a middle-aged woman sat reviewing papers. She looked up as they entered, said something in rapid Korean, and Seung-ho responded in the same language. Whatever he said made her laugh and look at Serenity with undisguised interest. "My aunt," Seung-ho explained, guiding Serenity to a private room separated from the main dining area by a silk screen. "She owns this place, and she's already decided you're too good for me." Smart woman. The smartest I know. He held her chair, another anachronistic courtesy, before sitting across from her. "She's also the only person in my life who still treats me like I'm 10 years old, and in need of constant correction." The table was already set with small dishes, banchan, the same kind of colorful side dishes she'd arranged in his home countless times. But here, in this intimate space with soft lighting and the scent of sizzling meat drifting from the kitchen, they felt different, special. "I don't know what half of these are," Serenity admitted, looking at the array of vegetables and pickled items. "Then I'll teach you." Seung-ho pointed to each dish, naming them in Korean and English. "This is kimchi, fermented cabbage, and this is japchae, glass noodles with vegetables. This one is dubu jorim, braised tofu. My aunt makes the best version I've ever had, including my mother's, which I will never admit to her face." Serenity tried a piece of kimchi, and the explosion of sour, spicy, complex flavor made her eyes widen. Oh, that's intense. Amazing." She took another bite. "I've had kimchi before from the grocery store, but this is completely different. The store-bought kind is to this what instant coffee is to the real thing." He watched her try each dish, and there was something almost possessive in his gaze. Not controlling, but deeply satisfied, like feeding her brought him genuine pleasure. "You like it. I love it." She did. Every bite was a revelation, complex and layered in ways she hadn't expected. "Is this what you grew up eating?" Yes and no. He poured tea for both of them from a ceramic pot. "My mother made traditional Korean food, but we were poor, really poor. The kind where you eat rice and kimchi for weeks because that's all there is. The kind where banchan like this," he gestured at the spread, "was for special occasions." His expression darkened slightly. "My father was absent, and then dead, in that order. I'm sorry. Don't be. He made his choices, and my mother made hers, to survive, to keep me fed and safe, to work jobs that broke her body because it meant I could go to school." He took a sip of tea. "The irony is that I ended up in exactly the kind of life she sacrificed to keep me out of." "The jopok," Serenity said the word carefully, watching his reaction. His eyebrows rose. "You know that term." "I've been studying and listening. And I'm not blind." She met his eyes. "You run a criminal organization. That's what this is, right? That's why men call you Young Nim. Why your associates were so afraid of you the other night. Why you have this kind of money and influence." "Yes." No hesitation. No attempt to sugarcoat it. "I run the Korean organization in Chicago and 3 surrounding states. We control gambling, some protection services, and various import-export businesses that operate in gray legal areas. We also have legitimate holdings, restaurants, real estate, investments, but the core of what I do is illegal and dangerous." She'd expected him to lie or deflect. The bald honesty was almost more unsettling. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you asked for honesty, and because if we're going to do this," he gestured between them, "you need to know what you're getting into, who you're getting involved with." He leaned forward. "I've killed people, Serenity. Not many and never without reason, but my hands aren't clean. I've made decisions that kept my people safe but destroyed others. I operate in a world where loyalty is everything and betrayal is punished without mercy. She should get up, walk out, run as fast and far as possible from this man who'd just casually admitted to murder. Instead, she found herself asking, why? Why do I do it? Why did you end up here? You said your mother sacrificed to keep you out of this life. So why? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain. Because when I was 14, my mother was assaulted by the son of the man who owned the building where we lived. A rich, powerful man who thought her poverty meant she was his to use however he wanted. His jaw tightened. She survived. But the man who hurt her, he walked free. His father paid off the police, threatened the witnesses, made sure nothing touched his precious son. Sean. The name came out naturally and he noticed, his eyes flickering with something that might have been gratitude. I joined the Jopok because they were the only ones who offered me what I needed: power, protection, the means to make sure what happened to my mother never happened to anyone I cared about again. He held her gaze. I'm not asking you to approve. I'm not even asking you to understand. I'm just telling you the truth, because you deserve that much before you decide whether you want to be here. Serenity's mind was spinning. Everything he'd said should have terrified her, should have sent her running. But instead, all she could think about was a 14-year-old boy watching his mother suffer and deciding that power was the only way to protect the people he loved. What happened? She asked quietly. To the man who hurt your mother. Seung-ho's expression went very cold. He learned that power is temporary and that some debts get paid eventually with interest. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The door opened and his aunt appeared with steaming plates. Galbi, marinated short ribs that smelled like heaven. She set them down, said something teasing in Korean that made Seung-ho respond with exasperated affection and disappeared again. She says I'm trying too hard, he translated, and that if you're smart, you'll eat quickly and leave before I bore you with my tragic backstory. Despite everything, Serenity laughed. Is that what we're calling this? Your tragic backstory? Everyone's got one. What's yours? He began cutting the meat with practiced efficiency. And don't say you don't have one. You work 3 times as hard as anyone I know. You're in debt. You're alone. There's a story there. She took a breath. Honesty, he'd said. My parents died when I was 8. Car accident. I went to live with my grandmother in Englewood. She raised me on her pension and love, which turned out to be enough until it wasn't. The old ache settled in her chest. She got sick 2 years ago. Cancer. We didn't have insurance. The bills. She stopped, swallowed. She died 16 months ago. Left me with $80,000 in medical debt and a lot of good memories that don't pay rent. I'm sorry. And he sounded like he meant it. That's why you work so hard. The debt. The debt. And because she taught me that dignity doesn't come from money or status, it comes from how you carry yourself, from doing what's right even when it costs you. Serenity met his eyes. She'd probably tell me to run from you as fast as possible. She'd be right. But she'd also tell me to look at people's actions, not their words. And you... She paused, trying to find the right words. You defended me. You've been kind to me. You're honest about who you are instead of pretending to be something else. Those actions matter too. So you're staying. His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes betrayed him. Hopeful, vulnerable, wanting. I'm staying. For dinner, at least. She smiled slightly. The food's too good to walk away from. Just the food. Maybe not just the food. They ate, and Serenity learned that Seung-ho was funny when he relaxed. Dry, self-deprecating humor that caught her off guard. He told her about growing up in Seoul, about his mother's determination to give him a normal childhood despite everything, about the first time he'd tried American fast food and decided that Chicago-style pizza was the greatest culinary achievement of Western civilization. You're wrong, Serenity said, laughing. Deep dish is not pizza. It's a casserole pretending to be pizza. Blasphemy. We're in Chicago. You're legally required to defend deep dish. I grew up on thin crust from the South Side. Don't tell me about Chicago pizza. He grinned, a real unguarded expression that transformed his face. There it is, the passion. I was wondering when you'd stop being so careful with me. I'm still being careful, I know, but maybe a little less than before. He reached across the table, and when she didn't pull away, he took her hand. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a gentle, hypnotic motion. I like this, you being here, being yourself with me. I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. But that wasn't quite true. She'd spent so long being invisible, being small, that she'd forgotten how to take up space, how to laugh without apologizing for the sound, how to exist without constantly calculating whether she was being too much or not enough. With Xiong-ho, she didn't feel like she had to calculate. She just felt seen. The door opened again and a man appeared, one of Xiong-ho's associates, his face tight with urgency. He spoke rapid Korean, and Serenity caught only fragments. Problem. Territory. Now. Xiong-ho's expression shifted instantly. I have to go. There's a situation. I understand. She did. This was his reality. His world. Go. He stood but didn't release her hand. This isn't how I wanted tonight to end. It's not ended. Just paused. She squeezed his fingers. Go do what you need to do. I'll get home safe. June will drive you. He gestured to the man in the doorway. Don't argue, it's late, and I'll worry if I don't know you're safe. Bossy. Concerned. He lifted her hand to his lips again. That same gesture from earlier, but this time lingering. Thank you for staying, for trying, for... He stopped, shook his head. Just thank you. Then he was gone, moving with that fluid, purposeful stride. John, the associate, waited patiently by the door, his expression carefully blank. Serenity gathered her things, said goodbye to Xiong-ho's aunt, and followed Jun to a sleek black car that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. The drive back to her apartment was silent, professional. Jun didn't speak, and she didn't try to make conversation. When they pulled up to her building, a shabby 3-story walk-up in Rogers Park, Jun said something in heavily accented English. Mr. Cha say you call. If need anything. Anytime. Thank you. She climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, unlocked the 3 deadbolts she'd installed herself, and stood in her tiny studio that smelled faintly of mildew and the Indian food from the restaurant downstairs. This was her world. Cramped, modest, safe. Xiong-ho's world was power and danger, and men who appeared in doorways speaking urgent Korean. It was criminal organizations and calculated violence, and a life where situations required immediate attention. They were impossible. Everything about this was impossible. Her phone buzzed. Home safe? She smiled despite herself. Yes. Thank you for dinner. And the honesty. Thank you for staying. For listening. For giving me a chance I probably don't deserve. You deserve more than you think. The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Can I see you tomorrow? Not at the house. Somewhere else. Somewhere that's just us. She should say no. Should establish boundaries. Should protect herself from whatever this was becoming. Instead, she typed, yes. The Chicago Botanic Garden was a world away from both the Lincoln Park estate and Serenity's cramped apartment, 382 acres of cultivated beauty in the northern suburbs, far enough from the city that it felt like stepping into a different reality. Xiong-ho had suggested it with the kind of casual certainty that said he'd given this thought, that he'd chosen a place where they could be just 2 people instead of a crime boss and his maid. Serenity spotted him near the Japanese garden, and for a moment she just watched. He was dressed casually again, dark jeans, a grey Henley, sunglasses that he pushed up onto his head when he saw her approaching. He looked younger like this, less dangerous, though she was learning that the danger was always there, just hidden beneath the surface, like the dragon tattoo that disappeared under his collar. You found it, he said by way of greeting. GPS is a wonderful thing. She fell into step beside him as they started down a winding path bordered by late-season flowers. I've never been here before. It's beautiful. My mother loves gardens. When she visited last year, we spent a whole day here. She said it reminded her of parks in Seoul. He glanced at her. I thought you might like it too. Because I'm into nature and gardens? She was teasing, and he caught it, that brief smile appearing. Because you deserve beauty and quiet, and a few hours where you're not working yourself to exhaustion or worrying about bills or being anyone other than who you want to be. The words settled over her like a blanket. You really do pay attention. I told you I did. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. Last night after I left, did you regret staying? No. She surprised herself with how quickly the answer came. I thought I would. Thought I'd go home and panic about everything you told me, about what this might become, but I didn't. She searched for words. I felt like I finally met you. The real you. Not Mr. Cha, the crime boss, or Sean, the employer. Just you. And I liked what I met. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. The gesture felt natural, inevitable. I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound insane. More insane than admitting you run a criminal organization on our first date. Much more insane than that. He stopped walking, turned to face her. I've been thinking about you for months, since the first week you started working at the house. I'd see you in the morning, humming while you worked, treating everyone with kindness even when they didn't notice, and I'd think—" He stopped, shook his head. "I'd think that you were the most beautiful thing in that entire mansion. Not the art, not the view. You." Serenity's breath caught. "Sean, let me finish, please." His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "I've built my entire life on control, on calculated decisions, on never letting emotion override strategy. And then you walked into my home and completely destroyed all of that. You made me want things I'd convinced myself I couldn't have. A normal conversation, a dinner without business, someone who sees me instead of what I represent. I do see you." She reached up with her free hand, touched his face, a bold gesture that felt right despite everything. "I see someone who protects his people, who loves his mother, who pays attention to the maid humming in his hallway, who built something powerful from nothing because he wanted to protect the people he cares about. You make me sound better than I am." "I don't think I do." She let her thumb brush across his cheekbone. "I think you're exactly who you are, complicated and dangerous and kind all at once, and I think—" She paused, gathering courage. "I think I want to know all of it, the good and the bad and everything in between." He kissed her. It wasn't tentative or asking permission. It was claiming, possessive, the kind of kiss that said mine without words. His hands came up to frame her face, tilting her head back, and Serenity melted into him with a soft sound that was part surprise and part relief. When they broke apart, she was breathless. "That was perfect." He rested his forehead against hers. "You're perfect, Serenity. Every curve, every smile, every moment of strength when the world tries to tell you you're not enough. You're perfect, and anyone who can't see that is blind." The words from that night. The words he'd said in front of his associates. But here, now, in this quiet garden with no one to perform for, they felt different, more real, more true. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of this, of what it could become, of losing myself in your world." "Don't." He pulled back slightly so he could see her face. "Don't lose yourself. I don't want that. I want you exactly as you are, strong and stubborn and too good for someone like me, but here anyway." He kissed her forehead, gentle this time. "And I'm scared too, if that helps. Terrified, actually, because you matter. You've become so important that I can't imagine my days without knowing you're in them." They walked for hours after that, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his organization, not the violent parts, but the structure, the loyalty, the way the Jopok operated like a family with its own codes and rituals. She told him about her grandmother, about growing up in Englewood, about the dreams she'd had to set aside when the medical bills came. "What did you want to be?" he asked. "Before everything." "A teacher. Elementary school. I loved kids. Still do." She smiled sadly. "But college was expensive. And then Grandma got sick and—" She shrugged. "Life happens. You could still do it." When she looked at him skeptically, he continued. "I'm serious. You're what, 26? That's not too old to go back to school. With $80,000 in debt and a maid's salary, I'll be paying that debt until I'm 50. What if you weren't?" She stopped walking. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying—" He seemed to choose his words carefully. "I have resources. Money isn't an object. If you wanted to go back to school, I could—" "No." The word came out sharper than she'd intended. "I can't take your money, Sean. That's not— We're not— That would make me something I don't want to be." His expression shifted. Hurt, then understanding. "You think I'm trying to buy you? I think you're used to fixing problems with money and power, but I'm not a problem to fix. I'm a person. And if I'm going to be in your life, I need it to be because you want me, not because you're trying to rescue me. I do want you." The intensity in his voice made her shiver. "More than I've wanted anything in a long time. But that doesn't mean I can't help. If you want to help, then be honest with me. Spend time with me. Let me know you without the power and money making everything complicated." She took his hand again. "I don't need rescuing. I just need someone who sees me as an equal, even when everything about our situation says we're not." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm not good at this, at relationships that aren't transactional." "Then we'll figure it out together." She squeezed his hand. "But I need you to understand something. I can't be the woman you take care of. I need to stand on my own feet. That's not negotiable." "I understand." And from his expression, she believed he did. "But if you ever change your mind, about school, about anything, the offer stands, not as a transaction, as someone who cares about you and wants to see you happy." They found a bench overlooking one of the lakes, and Serenity leaned against his shoulder, A simple intimacy that felt monumental. This was what she'd been missing her whole life. Someone who wanted to know her, who listened when she spoke, who respected her boundaries even when it clearly went against every protective instinct he had. "Tell me something no one else knows," she said softly. "Something real." He was quiet for so long. She thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I hate what I've become sometimes. The violence, the constant calculation, the way people fear me instead of knowing me." His arm came around her shoulders. "My mother is proud of what I've accomplished. The money, the power, the fact that we're safe now. But sometimes I look at her and wonder if she'd be prouder if I'd stayed nobody, if I'd stayed clean. Would you change it? If you could go back?" "No." No hesitation. "Because this path led me here, to you. And I can't regret anything that brought me to this bench in this garden with you in my arms." Serenity turned to look at him, and whatever he saw in her face made his expression soften. "You're going to break my heart, aren't you?" she whispered. "No." He kissed her temple. "I'm going to protect it. Because it's mine now, whether you meant to give it to me or not." The words should have been possessive, controlling. Instead, they felt like a promise, like safety. Her phone buzzed. Mrs. Kim asking about her schedule for tomorrow. The reminder that this wasn't just a beautiful afternoon in a garden, that they had real lives, real complications, real obstacles to navigate. "I should get back," she said reluctantly. "I have the evening shift. Call in sick." When she looked at him incredulously, he smiled. "Or don't. But I'm driving you home. And tomorrow," he pulled out his phone. "Tomorrow, I'm telling Mrs. Kim you have the day off. Paid. Sean, you said I could help by spending time with you. So let me. One day where we're just two people, no work, no obligations, just us." His eyes met hers. "Please." She should say no, should maintain some semblance of boundaries. But looking at him, at this dangerous, powerful man who'd somehow become vulnerable in her presence, she couldn't, didn't want to. "One day," she agreed. "But I'm choosing what we do. Deal." He stood, pulled her up with him. "Where are we going?" "Back to the south side. I want to show you my world, see how you handle my neighborhood." He laughed, that rare, genuine sound that made her heart flip. "I grew up in poverty and soul. I think I can handle the south side. We'll see about that." They drove back to the city in his car, a sleek Mercedes that looked absurdly out of place when he parked it on her street. Serenity half expected someone to break into it, but the neighborhood kids who usually hung around on the corner took one look at Seung-ho and scattered. Something about the way he carried himself, even in casual clothes, broadcast danger. "They're afraid of you," she observed. "Good. Means they won't bother you." He took her hand as they climbed the stairs to her apartment. "Show me where you live." The apartment was exactly as she'd left it, cramped, cluttered with books from the library. Her Korean study materials spread across the tiny kitchen table. She felt a flush of embarrassment at the contrast to his mansion, but he moved through the space with genuine interest. "This is yours," he said, picking up one of her notebooks filled with Korean vocabulary. "Your handwriting, your life." He set it down gently. "Thank you for letting me see it. It's not much. It's honest." He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "Everything about you is honest, real. That's worth more than any mansion." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. His hands spanned her waist, pulled her closer, and Serenity felt herself surrendering to the moment, to him, to the impossible thing growing between them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should go. Probably. But I don't want to. I know." She did know, could feel it in the way he held her, the way his body was taut with restraint. "But we're taking this slow, remember? Slow," he repeated, like he was trying to convince himself. "Right. Slow." He stepped back, putting space between them. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., I'll pick you up. Where are we going?" "You said you're choosing. So, where are we going?" She grinned. "Harold's Chicken. Best chicken in Chicago. And I want to see how a crime boss handles a South Side institution." He laughed. "You're trying to test me." "Maybe a little." After he left, Serenity stood in her apartment, still feeling the ghost of his touch, the memory of his kiss. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for today, for trusting me, for being exactly who you are. Sleep well, beautiful." She typed back. "Thank you for seeing me." His response was immediate, always, and somehow she believed him. Years had passed since that autumn day in the Botanic Garden, and the world had transformed in ways Serenity couldn't have imagined. She stood at the window of the Lincoln Park house, their home now, not just his, and watched the sun set over Lake Michigan. Behind her, she could hear Seung-ho's voice speaking gentle Korean, followed by a child's laughter. They'd gotten married 2 years ago, in a ceremony that blended both their cultures, gospel music and traditional Korean drums. Her old neighborhood friends and his Jopok associates, all coexisting with surprisingly little tension. His mother had cried through the entire ceremony, then spent the reception telling anyone who would listen that she'd known Serenity was special from the moment her son had mentioned the maid who hums. Serenity had gone back to school, earned her teaching degree, and now taught 3rd grade at a Southside elementary school where half her students looked like her and needed someone who understood where they came from. Seung-ho had insisted on paying off her debt, not as a transaction, but as a wedding gift, removing the burden that had weighed on her for so long. He'd also changed. Not completely. He still ran his organization, still made the hard decisions that came with that territory. But he'd shifted things, focused on the legitimate businesses, created more distance between himself and the violence. He did it for her, he said, for the life they were building, for the family they wanted. Mama, their daughter, ran into the room, all wild curls and infectious energy. 3 years old, with her mother's eyes and her father's determination. Appa says dinner ready. Serenity scooped her up, breathing in that perfect toddler scent. Does he? Well, we'd better not keep Appa waiting then. The dining room table was set for 4, the 3 of them plus Seung-ho's mother, who'd moved to Chicago last year and now lived in a nearby apartment where she could spoil her granddaughter relentlessly. Mrs. Kim had retired, but she still visited weekly, always bringing homemade kimchi and unsolicited advice. Seung-ho met Serenity's eyes across the table, and the look that passed between them held everything. The impossibility of where they'd started, the miracle of where they'd ended up, the bone-deep certainty that they'd found something worth fighting for. After dinner, after his mother had left and their daughter was tucked in bed, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The same city where a maid and a crime boss had somehow found each other against all logic and reason. "Do you ever regret it?" Serenity asked softly. "Choosing this? Choosing me?" Seung-ho pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her waist. "Every single day." She elbowed him, and he laughed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I regret," he continued, "that I didn't see you sooner, that you spent even one day in my house thinking you were invisible, that I wasted 6 months being too cautious to tell you what I felt." His grip tightened. "But choosing you, loving you, building this life with you, those are the only things I've ever done that feel completely, absolutely right." She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd defended her, protected her, loved her exactly as she was. "You know what I think about sometimes?" "What?" "That night, when your friends mocked me, when you said, 'She's perfect.'" He finished the sentence, his hand coming up to cup her face. "And I meant it, every word, then and now and always." "I love you," she whispered. "I love you more." He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. "My perfect, beautiful, impossibly stubborn wife." She laughed against his lips. "Your wife, who has to work tomorrow and needs sleep. Then let's go to bed." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together the way he'd done that first day in the garden. "But for the record, I'm never going to stop telling you you're perfect. You're stuck with that. I think I can live with it." They walked inside together, closing the door on the glittering city below, and Serenity thought about the journey that had brought them here. From invisibility to being seen, from isolation to family, from believing she wasn't enough to knowing that she was everything. Perfect curves, perfect smile, perfect heart, and most importantly, perfectly loved